Welcome to the mountains of Iga province in Japan. In the year 1580, during the Sengoku period, when Japan is torn by civil war between competing daimyo, feudal lords, when shinobi, the warriors we now call ninja, operate as covert agents, spies and assassins in the shadows of Japan's endless conflicts, and when a young shinobi named Takeda prepares for a nighttime infiltration mission that will test all the skills he has learned during years of rigorous training in the arts of stealth, deception, and silent killing. For the next few hours, we will explore what techniques shinobi actually used for nighttime infiltrations, examining the specialized equipment and clothing designed for invisibility and darkness, the methods for moving silently through buildings and across terrain, the lockpicking and wall-scaling tools that allowed access to heavily guarded compounds, and the brutal reality of a profession where discovery meant torture and death, and where success required absolute mastery of skills that took decades to develop. If you enjoy these detailed explorations of historical espionage and the practical realities behind legendary warriors, please like and subscribe to support our channel. Our story begins in a small mountain village in Iga province, one of the two primary regions, along with Koga province, where shinobi traditions developed and where families have practiced the arts of ninjutsu for generations, passing down techniques through oral instruction and through densho, written scrolls that contain the accumulated wisdom of centuries of covert operations. Takeda is 24 years old, a member of a minor shinobi family that has served various daimyo as covert agents for 3 generations. He has trained in ninjutsu since childhood, learning the 18 disciplines that comprise the shinobi skill set: taijutsu, unarmed combat; kenjutsu, swordsmanship; shuriken jutsu, throwing weapons; sojutsu, spear fighting; naginata jutsu, halberd techniques; kusarigama jutsu, chain and sickle weapons; kayaku jutsu, fire and explosives; henso jutsu, disguise and impersonation; shinobi iri, stealth and infiltration; ba jutsu, horsemanship; sui ren, water training; bo ryaku, strategy; choho, espionage; inton jutsu, escape and concealment; tenmon, meteorology; shimon, geography; seishin teki kyoyo, spiritual refinement; and ba jutsu, horsemanship. But Takeda's primary expertise is in shinobi iri, the art of stealth and infiltration, and tonight he will employ this expertise on a mission of critical importance to his current employer, a daimyo named Oda Nobunaga, who is one of the most powerful warlords in Japan, and who has tasked Takeda with infiltrating a rival's castle to steal military intelligence about troop deployments and fortification plans. The target is Difu Castle, held by a daimyo hostile to Oda Nobunaga, garrisoned by approximately 500 samurai and soldiers, surrounded by multiple defensive walls, and patrolled constantly by guards who have been specifically warned to watch for shinobi infiltrators. Discovery would mean immediate death, or worse, capture and torture to extract information about who sent him and what other operations Oda Nobunaga has planned. But Takeda has prepared for this mission meticulously, and he possesses skills and equipment specifically designed for precisely this type of operation. The preparation begins in the late afternoon, approximately 3 hours before sunset, in the small house where Takeda lives with his wife and 2 young children. The domestic scene is ordinary: children playing, his wife preparing the evening meal, the sounds and smells of daily life. But this normalcy contrasts sharply with what Takeda is about to do, creating a psychological disconnect that he has learned to manage through years of practice. His wife, Yuki, understands what tonight's mission entails. She comes from a shinobi family herself, and has been trained in many of the same skills, though her current role is managing the household and raising their children while Takeda conducts field operations. She helps him prepare without comment, understanding that expressing fear or concern would only make his psychological preparation more difficult. Takeda begins by bathing thoroughly, not for cleanliness in the modern hygiene sense, but for operational reasons. Human skin produces oils and odors that can betray presence to alert guards or to guard dogs. Bathing removes some of these odors, and also removes any distinctive smells from daily activities: cooking smoke, animal odors, anything that might be out of place in the target environment. After bathing, Takeda carefully inspects and prepares his specialized infiltration clothing. Contrary to popular modern imagery, shinobi did not typically wear all black clothing for nighttime operations. solid black actually stands out in most nighttime environments where ambient light creates shades of grey rather than absolute darkness. Instead, Takeda's infiltration clothing is dark blue-grey, a color called kon iro, that blends effectively into nighttime shadows and into the typical environment of Japanese buildings and grounds. The clothing consists of several layers. First, a close-fitting zubon, trousers, that extends to the ankles, made from cotton fabric that has been treated with persimmon tannin to darken the color and to reduce the fabric's tendency to make rustling sounds when moving. The trousers are tied securely at the waist and at the ankles to prevent them from snagging on obstacles or from making noise. Second, a uagi, jacket that fits closely to the torso, also made from treated cotton, with sleeves that are secured at the wrists with cloth ties. The jacket has multiple hidden pockets sewn into the lining, where small tools and equipment can be carried without creating obvious bulges or making noise. Third, a hood called a zukin that covers the head and the lower face, leaving only the eyes exposed. The zukin serves multiple functions. It conceals Takeda's features, making identification difficult if he is glimpsed. It reduces the visibility of skin, which can reflect light and betray presence, and it provides some protection against recognition if he must fight or flee. Over these basic garments, Takeda will wear additional equipment, as needed, for the specific infiltration route and objectives. His footwear is specialized tabi, split-toed socks made from cotton, that will be worn with waraji, straw sandals, during the approach to the castle, but that will be worn alone once he begins the actual infiltration. The tabi allow silent movement and provide good grip on various surfaces, while protecting the feet from injury. Some shinobi used specialized footwear with reversible soles that left footprints, suggesting they were traveling in the opposite direction, a deception tactic to confuse pursuers. Others used ashiko, iron climbing claws that fit over the tabi and provided enhanced grip for climbing walls and trees. Takeda has both types of specialized footwear, but will decide which to use based on the specific conditions he encounters. His equipment includes numerous specialized tools, each carefully selected and maintained for reliability. Kunai, a multi-purpose iron tool approximately 9 inches long, shaped like a dagger, but used primarily as a climbing aid, driven into wood or masonry to create handholds, as a digging implement, or as a weapon in emergencies. Takeda carries 3 kunai in specially designed pockets. Shuko, iron hand claws that fit over the palms and backs of the hands, with sharp points extending from the knuckles. These serve both as climbing aids, improving grip on rough surfaces, and as weapons for close combat. The shuko can be used to block sword strikes, the iron bands protecting the hands, to deliver slashing attacks, or to grip and control opponents. Kaginawa, a grappling hook attached to approximately 30 feet of strong rope made from braided hemp or hair. The Kaginawa allows Takeda to climb walls, to cross gaps, or to create rope bridges across obstacles. The hook is wrapped in cloth to prevent it from making noise when thrown or when it contacts surfaces. Mizugumo, circular wooden floats that attach to the feet, theoretically allowing walking on water. Historical evidence suggests these were less effective than popular legend claims. They were more likely used to cross muddy ground or shallow water quietly, rather than for walking on deep water. But Takeda carries a pair, in case he needs to cross the castle's moat. Lockpicks, a set of thin iron implements of various shapes, designed to manipulate the simple mechanical locks used on Japanese gates and doors during this period. Japanese locks are generally simpler than European locks of the same era, making them somewhat easier to pick for someone with training and practice. Uchitake, small containers of gunpowder mixed with iron filings that create bright sparks when ignited, used as distraction devices to draw guards' attention away from infiltration routes or to create confusion during escapes. Metsubushi, blinding powder made from ground pepper, ash, or sand, carried in hollowed eggshells or small containers, designed to be thrown into opponents' faces to disable them temporarily without making the noise that combat would create. In addition to these specialized tools, Takeda carries a tanto, a short sword approximately 12 inches in blade length, as his primary weapon, worn in a scabbard at his back, where it can be drawn quickly, but where it doesn't interfere with climbing or crawling. He also carries several shuriken, small iron throwing implements shaped like flat stars with sharpened points, though these are primarily tools of distraction or harassment rather than lethal weapons as popular culture portrays them. As sunset approaches, and the light begins to fade, Takeda performs a final equipment check, verifying that every item is secure, that nothing rattles or makes unexpected noise, that he can access each tool quickly without fumbling. This methodical preparation is as important as the physical skills. Infiltration operations fail as often from equipment problems as from skill deficiencies. His final preparation is mental and spiritual. He sits in meditation for several minutes, calming his mind, focusing his awareness, preparing psychologically for the risks and the violence that the night may bring. This mental preparation draws on Zen Buddhist practices that many shinobi studied. Though Takeda's meditation is more practical than mystical, he is not seeking enlightenment, but rather the mental clarity and emotional control that dangerous operations require. As full darkness falls and the time for departure approaches, Takeda embraces his wife and children, a silent farewell that acknowledges the possibility he may not return. Then he slips out into the night, beginning the journey to Gifu Castle and to the infiltration that will test everything he has learned about moving through darkness, about overcoming physical barriers, about remaining invisible and unheard in enemy territory, where hundreds of men are specifically watching for someone exactly like him. Takeda's journey to Gifu Castle covers approximately 15 miles of rough terrain. Mountain paths, rice paddies, streams, and finally the approaches to the castle town where the target compound is located. The entire journey must be conducted under cover of darkness, avoiding villages and settlements where his presence might be noted. Staying off main roads, like guards or patrols might challenge him. Let us follow Takeda through this approach phase, observing the techniques for nighttime navigation and for avoiding detection during travel through potentially hostile territory. The first phase of travel is through the mountains between Iga Province and the target area. The terrain is rugged and heavily forested, but Takeda knows it well. He has scouted the route during previous daylight reconnaissance missions, has memorized key landmarks and path features, has identified hazards and obstacles. Nighttime navigation without modern tools, like compasses or maps, requires different techniques than modern travelers might use. Takeda navigates primarily by terrain features that he memorized during daylight reconnaissance: distinctive rock formations, particular trees, the sound and direction of streams, the shapes of hills against the night sky. The night is clear, with a waning gibbous moon that provides some illumination, but that also creates shadows where threats might hide. Takeda prefers nights with some moonlight over completely dark nights. Absolute darkness makes navigation extremely difficult and increases the risk of injury from falls or from walking into obstacles. As he moves through the forest, Takeda employs specific walking techniques designed to minimize noise. The most important technique is called shinobi-ashi, or stealth stepping, a method of walking that places the outside edge of the foot down first, then slowly rolling the foot inward to transfer weight, testing the ground for twigs or leaves that might make noise before committing full body weight. This technique is slow, perhaps 1 mile per hour over rough terrain in darkness, but it allows nearly silent movement. Each step requires several seconds, the foot carefully placed and tested, the weight gradually transferred, constant awareness maintained for any sound or resistance that might indicate a noise-making hazard. Takeda also practices awareness of his surroundings through all senses, not just vision. He listens constantly for sounds that might indicate other people: voices, footsteps, equipment noise, the sounds of camps or settlements. He smells for smoke from fires, for food cooking, for the distinctive odors of human habitation. He feels the wind direction and adjusts his route to remain downwind of potential observers or of guard dogs that might detect his scent. After approximately 3 hours of careful movement through the mountains, Takeda reaches the edge of the agricultural lands surrounding Gifu Castle town. Here the terrain changes. Instead of forest, there are rice paddies, irrigation channels, farm buildings, and more importantly, a much higher probability of encountering people, even at night. Farmers sometimes work into the evening. Night soil collectors perform their unpleasant work during darkness to avoid offending people during daylight. Guards patrol the approaches to important towns, and bandits or masterless samurai, ronin, might be active in rural areas at night. Takeda's approach becomes even more cautious. He uses available cover: hedgerows between fields, irrigation ditches, the shadows of buildings, to avoid being silhouetted against the sky or being seen by anyone who might be watching. He encounters his first real obstacle approximately 1 mile from the castle town: a group of farmers working late to repair an irrigation channel. 3 men with lanterns are visible near the channel, their voices carrying in the still night air. Takeda cannot simply wait for them to leave. The mission timeline requires him to infiltrate the castle during the specific window when intelligence suggests certain documents will be accessible. He must find a route past the farmers without being detected. He observes their positions and their attention patterns, noting that their focus is on their work and on each other, not on their surroundings. He identifies a route that uses an irrigation ditch as concealment, allowing him to low crawl past their position at a distance of approximately 50 yards. Low crawling is exhausting and slow. Takeda must lie prone and pull himself forward using his elbows and knees, keeping his body as flat as possible, moving only when the farmers are focused on their work or are talking, and therefore creating covering noise. The crawl covers perhaps 100 yards and takes nearly 30 minutes, leaving Takeda's clothing muddy and his muscles aching, but he passes the farmers undetected. As he approaches the castle town itself, the challenges increase. The town is partially walled, with gates that are closed and guarded at night. Normal entry is impossible. Takeda cannot simply walk through a gate claiming legitimate business, as all travelers are challenged at night, and his lack of travel documents and his suspicious appearance would immediately mark him as a potential threat. Instead, he must find an alternative entry point. During his reconnaissance missions, he identified a section of the town wall near a temple where the wall is lower than average, approximately 8 feet rather than the typical 12, and where the nearby temple buildings provide concealment from casual observation. Takeda approaches this section of wall using a drainage channel as concealment, crawling through foul-smelling water and mud, accepting the discomfort as the price of remaining undetected. He reaches the base of the wall without encountering guards, though he can hear sentries walking their patrols on the wall top, approximately 40 feet away. He waits in the drainage channel for several minutes, observing the sentry patterns, timing their movements. He determines that the sentries pass this section approximately every 15 minutes, and that they spend approximately 30 seconds walking past before moving on to the next section. This gives Takeda a window of approximately 14.5 minutes to scale the wall and to find concealment on the other side before the next sentry passes. It's adequate time for someone with his training, though there is minimal margin for error. When the next sentry passes, Takeda counts to 60, allowing the sentry to move far enough away that small sounds won't be heard, then begins scaling the wall. He uses his shuko hand claws to grip the rough stone surface, his tabby-clad feet finding tiny irregularities in the masonry. His years of climbing practice allowing him to ascend smoothly and quickly. 8 feet is not a great height, and Takeda reaches the top in approximately 30 seconds. He carefully peers over the wall top, verifying that no one is watching from the other side. Then he pulls himself up and immediately drops down the other side, landing in a crouch, ready to move or to fight if someone has seen him. No alarm is raised. He has successfully entered the castle town undetected. But the infiltration is far from complete. The castle itself, the fortified compound where the daimyo resides and where the target documents are kept, lies approximately half a mile away through the town's narrow streets, past multiple guard posts, across at least one more wall, and into the main keep where security will be most intense. Takeda moves through the town, using the techniques he has practiced for urban infiltration. He stays in the deepest shadows, avoiding areas where moonlight illuminates the streets. He moves from building to building, using doorways and alcoves as temporary hiding spots, pausing frequently to observe and to listen before continuing. The town at night is not completely deserted. Some shops are still operating. Some residents are moving through the streets. Guards are visible at key intersections. Takeda must blend into this environment, using Hensojutsu, disguise and impersonation, to avoid suspicion. He removes his hood temporarily, adjusts his clothing to look less like infiltration gear and more like the plain working clothes of a commoner, adopts the posture and movement patterns of someone who belongs here and who has legitimate business. When he encounters other people on the streets, he doesn't flee or hide, but rather continues walking naturally, perhaps nodding acknowledgement if they look at him, but not engaging in conversation. This technique, hiding in plain sight, rather than always avoiding all contact, is often more effective in populated areas where someone trying too hard to stay hidden becomes more suspicious. By this approach, Takeda makes steady progress through the town, eventually reaching the outer defensive wall of the castle compound proper. Here the security is much tighter. The walls are higher, approximately 15 feet, guards are more numerous and more alert, and the approach is across open ground that offers minimal concealment. This is where Takeda's specialized equipment and skills become essential, where the techniques developed over centuries of shinobi practice will determine whether he successfully infiltrates the castle or whether he is discovered and killed. The outer wall of Gifu Castle compound presents Takeda's most significant physical barrier. 15 feet of stone masonry, topped with defensive features, patrolled by alert guards, positioned to deny access to exactly the kind of infiltration Takeda is attempting. Let us examine the specific techniques and equipment that allow shinobi to overcome such barriers, observing both the physical skills and the tactical planning required for successful wall penetration. Takeda has identified his approach route through careful reconnaissance. The target section of wall is near a corner tower where guards' attention is typically focused outward, watching for external threats, rather than inward toward the wall itself. The wall at this point runs alongside a drainage channel that provides a depression in the ground, offering some concealment during the approach. He waits in the drainage channel for nearly an hour, observing the guard patterns on the wall top. He counts the intervals between guard patrols, approximately 12 minutes for each complete circuit, and he observes that the guards use lanterns that make them visible well before they reach any given point. He also notes the positions of other guards in the nearby tower and on adjacent wall sections, determining the angles from which he might be observed and identifying the blind spots where the geometry of the fortifications creates areas that no guard can see directly. Finally, he observes environmental factors: the wind direction, important for preventing sounds from carrying to guards; the moon's position. He prefers to climb when the moon is behind clouds if possible, reducing visibility, and any ambient sounds that might provide covering noise for his climbing sounds. When Takeda judges conditions optimal, the moon temporarily obscured by clouds, the wind blowing from the wall toward his position, carrying sounds away from guards rather than toward them, the patrol having just passed his position, he emerges from the drainage channel and approaches the wall base. His first tool is the kaginawa, the grappling hook and rope. The hook is a specialized design with 4 iron prongs that spread outward from a central shaft, each prong approximately 4 inches long, designed to catch on the wall top or on defensive features. But throwing a grappling hook creates noise. The hook whistles through the air, the rope makes a hissing sound, and the hook makes a distinct thunk when it strikes stone. These sounds might alert guards, so Takeda cannot simply throw the hook and hope guards don't notice. Instead, he employs a more sophisticated technique. He has wrapped the hook in thick cloth that mutes the sound when it strikes surfaces. He has treated the rope with oil that reduces the hissing sound it makes when moving through the air. He throws the hook with a technique that minimizes velocity and sound, a gentle lofted throw that sends the hook upward in a high arc, allowing it to descend onto the wall top relatively gently rather than striking it with force. The throw requires precise judgment. Too little force and the hook doesn't reach the wall top. Too much force and it makes excessive noise. Takeda has practiced this throw thousands of times during training, developing the muscle memory that allows accurate execution under stress. His first throw is successful. The hook clears the 15-foot wall height and settles onto the wall top with a muffled sound barely louder than the night wind. Takeda tugs the rope gently, setting the hook's prongs, verifying that it will support his weight. Then he begins to climb. The rope climbing technique is straightforward, but requires significant upper body and core strength. Takeda grips the rope with his hands while pinching it between his feet, then pulls with his arms while pushing with his legs, ascending in a series of coordinated movements. He wears his shuko hand claws during the climb, the iron bands providing better grip on the rope and protecting his hands from rope burn. He climbs smoothly and steadily, neither rushing, which would create more noise and movement that might catch a guard's eye, nor moving so slowly that he's vulnerable to discovery for an extended period. 15 feet of vertical rope climbing takes Takeda approximately 30 seconds. As he nears the wall top, he slows and carefully peers over the edge, verifying that no guard is immediately present. Seeing the wall top clear, he pulls himself up and over, rolling smoothly across the top and dropping immediately to the inner courtyard side, rather than pausing silhouetted against the sky. The drop from the wall's inner side is approximately 12 feet, lower than the outer wall, because the ground level inside the compound is higher than outside. Takeda absorbs the landing by rolling, distributing the impact across his body rather than landing flat-footed with a thud that would create noise and that might cause injury. He immediately moves to the shadow of a building perhaps 20 feet from the wall, getting out of the open courtyard and into concealment before any passing guard might spot him. He retrieves his rope and grappling hook, coiling them and securing them to his body. Leaving equipment behind would provide evidence of infiltration and might compromise future operations. Now he is inside the castle compound proper, but he still faces multiple obstacles before reaching his target. The compound is laid out in the typical Japanese castle design: concentric defensive layers with the main keep, Tenshu, at the center, surrounded by courtyards and subsidiary buildings, all designed to channel attackers through killing zones and to provide multiple defensive positions. Takeda must cross these courtyards, must avoid or circumvent guard posts, must enter the main keep building, must locate the specific room where the target documents are kept, and must then extract with the intelligence without being discovered. Each of these challenges requires different techniques. Crossing the courtyards requires using available cover, storage buildings, wells, walls, anything that creates shadows or breaks line of sight to guard positions. Takeda moves from cover to cover, pausing frequently to observe and to listen, advancing only when he's confident the route ahead is clear. At one point, he encounters a guard patrol passing through a courtyard he needs to cross. Rather than waiting for them to pass, which might take too long and might risk another patrol arriving, Takeda employs a distraction technique. He retrieves one of his uchitake, the small gunpowder devices designed to create sparks and noise. He positions himself in cover, then throws the uchitake approximately 50 yards to the left of his intended route, aiming for an area near a storage building. The device strikes the ground and ignites, creating a shower of bright sparks and a loud crackling sound. The guards immediately react, turning toward the sound, calling out to each other, moving to investigate. While the guards are focused on the distraction, Takeda quickly crosses the courtyard they were patrolling, moving silently but quickly, covering the exposed ground in approximately 15 seconds, and reaching cover on the far side before the guards complete their investigation of the false alarm. This distraction technique is risky. It alerts guards that something unusual is happening, potentially increasing overall alertness, but it provides a window of opportunity where guards' attention is directed away from the infiltrator's actual route, allowing movement that would otherwise be impossible. Using such techniques, Takeda makes steady progress through the castle compound, eventually reaching the main keep, a multi-story wooden structure, approximately 50 feet tall, housing the daimyo's private quarters, administrative offices, treasure rooms, and the document storage where his target intelligence is kept. The keep presents new challenges. The building is locked at night, with guards stationed at the main entrances. The upper floors, where the document storage is located, are inaccessible from ground level, except through the main stairways, which are surely guarded, or at least easily observed. Takeda must find an alternative entry point and an alternative route to the upper floors. This is where his climbing skills and specialized equipment become essential for the final penetration into the most secure area of the castle. The main keep of Gifu Castle is a substantial wooden structure built using traditional Japanese post and beam architecture, with external walls made from wooden panels, a tiled roof, and multiple floors connected by internal stairways. While impressive and defensible, the building's construction creates vulnerabilities that a skilled shinobi can exploit. Let us follow Takeda as he infiltrates the keep itself, observing the specific techniques for entering locked buildings and for moving through them undetected. Takeda's approach to the keep uses the building's architecture against itself. Traditional Japanese buildings have external rain shutters, amado, that close over windows and openings at night. These shutters are typically made from wood, slide on rails, and are secured with simple latches from the inside. During his reconnaissance, Takeda identified a first-floor window where the shutters appear slightly warped, creating a small gap between the shutter edge and the building frame. This gap may allow access to the internal latch. He approaches the identified window carefully, staying in shadows, moving only when certain no one is watching. He examines the gap in the shutter closely. It's approximately a quarter-inch wide, enough to insert a thin tool, but too narrow for a hand. From one of his hidden pockets, Takeda retrieves a specially designed lockpick, not for a lock in the Western sense, but rather a thin, flexible iron strip, approximately 8 inches long and a quarter-inch wide, designed to be inserted into narrow gaps to manipulate latches and fasteners. He inserts the tool into the gap between shutter and frame, feeling carefully for the internal latch. Japanese shutters typically use simple wooden or metal hooks that rest in catches. The latch can be lifted if approached from the correct angle. The manipulation requires delicate touch and patience. Takeda works the tool gently, feeling for the latch, trying different angles, applying gentle pressure. After approximately 3 minutes of careful manipulation, he feels the latch lift, and the shutter slides open, approximately an inch. He pauses, listening for any reaction from inside the building. Hearing nothing, he carefully slides the shutter open further, creating an opening large enough to climb through. The shutter's motion is smooth. The well-maintained rails allow movement without significant noise. Once the opening is adequate, Takeda climbs through into the building interior. He finds himself in what appears to be a storeroom of some kind, shelves containing pottery, cloth, and various goods dimly visible in the faint moonlight entering through the now open shutter. He carefully closes the shutter behind him, restoring the latch to its closed position. This serves multiple purposes. It prevents drafts that might alert occupants to the breach. It maintains the building's appearance of being secure, and it preserves his escape route by ensuring the shutter can be opened again from inside when he needs to exit. Now inside the keep, Takeda must navigate to the upper floors where the document storage is located. This requires moving through the building without alerting the guards stationed at various points, and without disturbing any residents who might be sleeping in various chambers. Japanese buildings have distinctive characteristics that affect infiltration techniques. The floors are typically constructed from wooden boards that can creak when weight is applied. The interior walls are often made from fusuma, sliding doors covered with paper or cloth that provide minimal sound insulation. Conversations and movements in one room are easily audible in adjacent rooms. Movement through such a building requires techniques specifically adapted to these characteristics. The most important is understanding where to step to minimize creaking. Wooden floorboards are supported by joists beneath, and the boards creak most when weight is applied between joists where the board flexes. Stepping directly over joists where the board is supported reduces creaking significantly. Takeda moves through the building by first observing the floor construction, identifying the likely joist positions, typically visible as subtle lines or slight depressions in the floor surface, then stepping carefully on these stronger points. His movements are slow and methodical. Each step is carefully placed, weight is transferred gradually, constant listening is maintained for any sound that might indicate his presence has been detected. He navigates corridors by staying close to walls where floor construction is typically stronger and where shadows are deepest. When he must cross open areas where moonlight enters through windows, he moves quickly but silently, minimizing the time he might be visible to anyone who happens to look. He encounters his first serious obstacle on the stairway to the second floor. A guard is positioned at the top of the stairs, sitting on a small stool, apparently half asleep, but still present and potentially dangerous if alerted. Takeda cannot simply walk past the guard. Even half asleep, the guard would certainly notice someone ascending the stairs. He cannot easily attack the guard without creating noise that would alert others. He needs a way to access the second floor without using the guarded stairway. His solution draws on another technique from shinobi tradition, climbing the building's exterior. While he is already inside the keep, the building's post and beam construction creates exterior features that can be climbed: decorative beams, support pillars, window frames. Takeda returns to the first floor window he entered through, opens it again, and climbs out onto the building's exterior. Using his shuko hand claws and his climbing skills, he scales the exterior wall to the second floor level, approximately 12 feet of vertical climbing on wooden surfaces with minimal handholds. The climb is more exposed than he would prefer. If anyone in the courtyard below looks up, they might see his dark form against the building's lighter wood. But the climb is relatively brief, and the alternative of confronting the guard is more risky. He reaches a second floor window, finds it shuttered as expected, and uses his lockpick tool to manipulate the internal latch, just as he did on the first floor. The second floor shutter opens, and Takeda climbs through into what appears to be an administrative office. Desks, shelves of documents, writing implements visible in the moonlight. This may be very close to his target location. Intelligence suggested that military documents were stored in administrative offices on the upper floors of the keep, and this room fits the description. Takeda begins carefully examining documents, looking for the specific intelligence his employer requested. Information about troop deployments, fortification plans, supply logistics, alliance negotiations. The documents are written in formal Japanese and Chinese characters, requiring literacy skills that Takeda developed during his training. Not all shinobi were literate, but those employed for intelligence gathering needed to read, and often to write, in order to copy or forge documents. He finds several promising documents: a letter discussing troop movements, a map showing fortification positions, a supply inventory that reveals military logistics. He cannot take originals without making the theft obvious, so he must copy the information. From his equipment, he retrieves paper and a small writing kit. He works quickly but carefully, copying the key information by the faint moonlight. His years of practice in calligraphy allowing him to produce accurate copies even in the difficult conditions. The copying takes approximately 20 minutes, an eternity while inside an enemy stronghold, but necessary to obtain the intelligence properly. Every moment increases the risk that someone will discover him, that his presence will be detected, that the mission will end in capture or death. Finally, he completes the copies, carefully folds them, and secures them in a waterproof case hidden in his clothing. The original documents are returned to exactly their original positions. Any disturbance might alert the document custodians that someone has accessed the materials, compromising the intelligence value, and potentially revealing that a spy has penetrated the castle. Now Takeda must exit the keep, cross the castle compound, escape over the walls, and return to friendly territory with the intelligence intact. The extraction is as dangerous as the infiltration, and the burden of carrying valuable intelligence makes capture even more catastrophic than it would have been during the approach. Takeda begins his extraction from Gifu Castle. The escape phase of an infiltration mission is often more dangerous than the entry. The infiltrator is potentially more fatigued, the element of surprise is gone if any evidence of intrusion has been discovered. And guards may be more alert during the pre-dawn hours when their shift is nearing its end, and when awakening functions reduce the dulled alertness of deep night. Let us follow Takeda through his escape, observing both the planned extraction route and the adaptations required when circumstances don't match the plan. Takeda's planned extraction route reverses his infiltration path. Exit the keep through the second-floor window, descend to the courtyard, cross to the outer wall, use the rope and grappling hook to descend the outer wall, then retreat through the castle town and back to the mountains. But as Takeda prepares to exit the second-floor window, he hears voices approaching in the corridor outside the office. Guards conducting a routine patrol, checking rooms, ensuring everything is secure. He has perhaps 30 seconds before they enter this office. If they discover him, they will raise the alarm, and extraction will become a running battle against hundreds of enemies. He must either hide or must find an alternative escape immediately. The office offers limited hiding places. The desks are too small to conceal a person. The document shelves are too visible. The only option is the ceiling space. Traditional Japanese buildings have suspended ceilings made from light wood and paper, creating a gap between the ceiling and the roof structure that is sometimes used for storage, but that could also conceal a person. Takeda quickly and quietly climbs onto a desk, carefully removes one of the ceiling panels, and pulls himself up into the ceiling space. The space is cramped, perhaps 2 feet of clearance, and the ceiling structure is light, not designed to support significant weight. He must distribute his weight across multiple support beams to avoid breaking through the ceiling. He carefully replaces the ceiling panel, just as he hears the office door slide open below. The guards enter, their lantern light visible through cracks in the ceiling panel, their voices clearly audible as they conduct their inspection. Everything appears normal, one guard says, his voice bored, suggesting this is routine rather than a response to any specific alert. Check the shutters, another guard responds. The captain is paranoid about infiltrators, thinks every shadow is a ninja. Takeda freezes, barely breathing. If the guards discover that the shutters have been opened from inside, they will immediately suspect infiltration and will search the room thoroughly. He hears the guards moving around the room, hears them checking various features. One guard approaches the window and tests the shutter. Secure, the guard announces after a moment of examination. Apparently, the latch Takeda replaced appears normal enough not to raise suspicion. After approximately 2 minutes that feel like hours to Takeda, cramped in the ceiling space, the guards complete their inspection and exit the room, sliding the door closed behind them. Takeda waits several more minutes, ensuring the guards have moved on to other areas. then carefully removes the ceiling panel and lowers himself back into the office. The close call has increased his sense of urgency. He needs to exit the castle immediately, before another patrol, or before the approaching dawn makes concealment impossible. He opens the second-floor window and climbs out onto the building's exterior, descending the 12 feet to the courtyard, using the same handholds he employed during the climb up. The descent is quicker than the ascent. Gravity assists rather than opposes, but it's also riskier as controlling the descent requires more grip strength to avoid simply falling. He reaches the ground safely and immediately moves into the shadows of a nearby building, pausing to observe and to plan his route across the courtyard. But the situation has changed during the time he spent inside the keep. The moon has set, leaving the courtyard in deeper darkness than before. Good for concealment, but challenging for navigation. And more concerningly, he can hear increased guard activity, more patrols moving through the compound, more voices, more lantern light visible.
He suspects that while the office inspection didn't detect his presence, something else may have alerted the castle's security to possible infiltration. Perhaps his distraction device earlier created more suspicion than he anticipated. Perhaps a guard noticed some other evidence of his presence. Regardless of the reason, security is heightened, and extraction will be more difficult. Takeda decides to alter his escape route. The main wall where he entered is likely to have increased guard presence, but the castle has multiple walls and multiple potential exit points. He recalls from his reconnaissance that the eastern wall near the stables has a section where a large tree grows close to the wall, potentially providing an alternative climbing aid. He navigates through the compound toward the eastern wall, using the same cover-to-cover movement techniques he employed during infiltration. The increased darkness helps. Guards with lanterns are easily visible and audible, allowing him to avoid them while he remains invisible in the shadows. He reaches the eastern wall section and locates the tree, a large pine approximately 40 feet tall with branches extending over the wall. The lowest branch is approximately 15 feet above ground, requiring significant jumping ability to reach or requiring use of the tree's trunk for climbing. Takeda chooses to climb the trunk. Pine trees have rough bark that provides reasonable grip, and the trunk's diameter at this height is manageable for the climbing technique where he wraps his arms and legs around the trunk and shimmies upward. The climb is physically demanding. The rough bark scrapes his hands and arms despite the protection of his clothing, and the technique requires tremendous upper body and leg strength. But he reaches the lowest branch after approximately 2 minutes of strenuous effort. From the branch, he can access higher branches that extend over the wall. He climbs carefully from branch to branch, testing each before committing his full weight, avoiding branches that might crack or break under his weight. He reaches a branch that extends approximately 10 feet over the wall's outer side, approximately 25 feet above the ground outside. This is higher than he would prefer for a drop, but the alternative is returning to the more heavily guarded sections of wall. He positions himself on the branch, hanging from it by his hands, then drops. The 25-foot fall is at the edge of what's safe even for a trained shinobi, but Takeda executes a roll upon landing, distributing the impact and converting vertical momentum into horizontal motion. The landing is hard. He feels the jar in his ankles and knees, but nothing is broken or seriously injured. He is now outside the castle compound, but he is in the space between the outer castle wall and the town wall, still technically inside the castle town's defenses. He must now exit the town, and the gates are certainly closed and guarded. His original entry point through the town wall is possible, but risky. The guards may have increased the patrols there as well. Instead, Takeda heads toward a different section of town wall that he noted during reconnaissance, a section where a drainage channel exits the town through a culvert in the wall. The culvert is small, perhaps 3 feet in diameter, and it carries the town's wastewater, meaning it will be extremely unpleasant. But it should be unguarded, as no one expects infiltrators to use such a disgusting route. He locates the culvert and examines it. As expected, it's dark, narrow, and reeks of human waste and rotting garbage. But it does penetrate the wall completely, and it appears to be open rather than grated. Takeda steels himself for the unpleasantness, then enters the culvert, crawling through the foul water and waste. The crawl is claustrophobic and disgusting. His hands and knees press into decomposing matter. The smell is overwhelming. The darkness is absolute. But he focuses on moving forward, on reaching the exit, on completing the mission despite the degrading conditions. After approximately 5 minutes of crawling that seems to last forever, he sees light ahead,
the culvert's exit. He emerges into a drainage ditch outside the town wall, covered in filth, reeking, but free and undetected. He quickly moves away from the town, heading toward the mountains and safety. The intelligence is secure. The mission is essentially complete, though he still faces the 15-mile return journey through potentially hostile territory. But Takeda is experienced, is motivated, and is carrying intelligence that will be valuable to his employer. He will reach safety, will deliver the intelligence, will collect his payment, and will add another successful mission to his record. Proof that the techniques of shinobi infiltration, developed over generations and refined through countless operations, remain effective tools of espionage and covert action in Japan's age of endless warfare.
As we conclude our exploration of shinobi nighttime infiltration techniques,
let us examine what historical evidence tells us about ninjutsu and the shinobi who practiced it,
what we can know with confidence, and what remains uncertain or has been distorted by later mythology,
and what this reveals about espionage and covert operations in medieval Japan. The historical evidence for shinobi and their techniques comes from several types of sources. Densho, written scrolls containing ninjutsu teachings transmitted within specific families or schools. Period accounts from daimyo and samurai who encountered or employed shinobi. Military manuals that discuss intelligence gathering and covert operations, and later compilations of ninjutsu knowledge created after the Sengoku period ended. The most important historical densho include the Bansen Shukai, compiled in 1676 by Fujibayashi Yasutake, a shinobi from Iga province. The Shininki, written in 1681 by Notori Ryu master Notori Masatake, and the Ninpaden, compiled in the 18th century. These texts provide detailed information about shinobi techniques, equipment, philosophy, and methods. What can we conclude with confidence about shinobi nighttime infiltration techniques? First, shinobi were real historical actors who operated primarily during Japan's Sengoku period, 1467 to 1615, a time of civil war, and daimyo employed various means, including espionage, assassination, and covert operations to advance their interests. The shinobi were not supernatural warriors, but were skilled professionals who specialized in intelligence gathering and covert operations. Second, shinobi developed sophisticated techniques specifically for infiltration operations. The densho describe methods for climbing walls, picking locks, moving silently, disguising oneself, using various specialized tools, and extracting intelligence without detection. These techniques reflect practical knowledge developed through experience rather than mystical or superhuman abilities. Third, the specialized equipment we described, kunai, shuko, kaginawa, mizugumo, and various other tools, are documented in historical sources and in surviving examples. Some tools, like kunai and shuko, have been found in archaeological contexts, while others are depicted in period illustrations or are described in the densho. Fourth, shinobi training was comprehensive and long-term. The densho indicate that mastery of ninjutsu required years of practice in multiple disciplines, that shinobi often came from families with traditions of ninjutsu practice spanning generations, and that the training emphasized practical skills rather than elaborate martial arts forms. What remains uncertain or has been distorted by later mythology? The popular image of ninja, dressed in all black uniforms, armed with mystical weapons, engaging in fantastical feats, is a distortion shaped by modern myths, movies, and comic books. In reality, the shinobi were practical, professional spies and operatives who used stealth, deception, and skill to achieve their objectives. Performing impossible acrobatics, using throwing stars as primary weapons, possessing supernatural abilities, is largely a creation of 20th century popular culture, particularly from movies, television, and manga. This image has minimal basis in historical reality. Historical shinobi wore clothing appropriate to their specific missions, sometimes disguises that allowed them to blend into particular environments, sometimes dark-colored clothing for nighttime operations, sometimes ordinary clothing that didn't attract attention. The stereotypical all-black ninja uniform appears to derive from Japanese theater, where stagehands wore all black and were considered invisible by convention, not from actual historical practice. Shuriken thrown stars were real weapons documented in historical sources, but they were primarily used for distraction or harassment rather than as lethal weapons. The popular image of ninja killing enemies with thrown shuriken is dramatic, but historically inaccurate. Shuriken were supplementary weapons, not primary killing tools. The supernatural abilities attributed to ninja in popular culture, walking on water, becoming invisible, transforming into animals, have no basis in historical reality. The densho sometimes use metaphorical or coded language that later interpreters may have misunderstood as claims of supernatural abilities, but the actual techniques described are practical and based on skill and deception rather than magic. The social status of shinobi is also often misunderstood. Popular culture often portrays ninja as mysterious outsiders or rebels against samurai authority. In reality, many shinobi were employed by samurai and daimyo as specialized operatives, were sometimes samurai themselves who also practiced shinobi skills, or were from lower social classes who found employment opportunities in covert operations. The shinobi of Iga and Koga provinces, the most famous shinobi communities, were often from farming families who practiced ninjutsu as a specialized skill that allowed them to earn income through employment by daimyo. Some shinobi achieved reasonable social status and respect through their service, while others remained socially marginal. What can we learn from studying historical shinobi techniques? First, effective espionage and covert operations require specialized training and specialized equipment. The shinobi developed tools and techniques specifically optimized for their operational requirements: climbing tools for scaling walls, lockpicks for defeating security measures, dark clothing for nighttime concealment. Modern special operations forces similarly use specialized equipment and training for covert missions. Second, successful infiltration operations require patience, planning, and attention to detail. The mission we narrated involved extensive reconnaissance, careful route planning, methodical equipment preparation, and patient execution, where Takeda spent hours moving short distances to avoid detection. Modern intelligence operations similarly require extensive preparation and careful execution. Third, physical skills alone are insufficient without tactical intelligence and situational awareness. Takeda's success depended not just on his climbing ability or his lock-picking skills, but on his knowledge of guard patterns, his understanding of building architecture, his ability to adapt when circumstances changed, and his tactical judgment about when to act and when to wait. Fourth, covert operations involve risks and costs that are not apparent in romanticized portrayals. Takeda risked death or torture, endured extremely unpleasant conditions, crawling through sewage, experienced psychological stress, and accepted that discovery would mean not just his own death, but potentially repercussions against his family. Historical shinobi face similar risks and costs. The legacy of shinobi culture in modern Japan is complex. During the Tokugawa period, 1615 to 1868, when Japan achieved relative peace, the demand for shinobi services decreased dramatically, and many shinobi families transitioned to other occupations or became consultants who passed on knowledge through the densho. By the Meiji period, 1868 to 1912, when Japan modernized rapidly and adopted Western military practices, traditional shinobi methods were largely obsolete for military purposes, though they maintained some cultural cachet and became subjects of romantic fiction. The 20th century saw the transformation of shinobi into ninja as popular culture figures, first in Japan and later internationally. Movies, television shows, comic books, and video games created the modern ninja mythology, a mixture of historical elements, theatrical inventions, and pure fantasy that bears only limited resemblance to historical shinobi. But scholarly interest in historical ninjutsu has also increased in recent decades. Researchers have studied the densho, have examined surviving equipment and documents, have attempted to reconstruct historical techniques through experimental archaeology, and have worked to separate historical reality from popular mythology. This research reveals that historical shinobi were skilled professionals who practiced a sophisticated set of techniques for covert operations, who served important functions in medieval Japanese warfare, who developed training systems and equipment that were effective for their purposes, and who deserve to be understood on their own terms rather than through the distorting lens of modern popular culture. For modern readers interested in espionage, special operations, or martial arts, the study of historical shinobi techniques offers insights into how pre-modern societies approached covert operations, how specialized skills were developed and transmitted across generations, how operational security and tradecraft functioned without modern technology, and how human ingenuity could overcome physical barriers and security measures through patient application of specialized knowledge. The nighttime infiltration techniques we have explored, the silent movement methods, the wall climbing skills, the lock-picking tools, the disguise and deception practices, represent centuries of accumulated knowledge, refined through trial and error, passed down through families and schools, applied in countless operations during Japan's age of warfare. Warriors like our fictional Takeda represent real shinobi who conducted such missions, who risked and sometimes lost their lives in service to their employers, who developed remarkable skills through dedicated training, and who contributed to the rich military history of medieval Japan. Understanding what shinobi actually did, the real techniques, the real equipment, the real operational methods, allows us to appreciate both the sophistication of their craft and the fundamental humanity of people who practice this dangerous profession. They were not supernatural beings, but were skilled professionals whose achievements reflected training, experience, courage, and often good fortune in the dangerous world of covert operations. The secrets of shinobi nighttime infiltrations, the methods for moving through darkness, the techniques for overcoming physical barriers, the skills for remaining undetected in enemy territory. These represent a fascinating chapter in the history of espionage and special operations, deserving of study and understanding that goes beyond the mythology to examine the historical reality of Japan's shadow warriors.